Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you're tuning in from. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm really excited that you're all here for the workshop, For the Love of Trees with Emily Carr. My name's Sydney Howlett, and I'm going to be co-facilitating this session today with a colleague from Art Canada Institute, who's Emma, who's going to be joining us in just a couple of seconds. Before we get started, I do just want to go through a couple of housekeeping items. So as I mentioned before the recording started, that this session is being recorded. So please leave your cameras on if you choose so to, but just know that they will be in the recording, which will be available for viewing tomorrow. So if you do have to leave us a little bit early, you can catch up on anything you missed tomorrow. The chat is available. So if you do have any questions or comments throughout the session, I encourage you to use the chat actively. If we don't get to your question right away, we will come back to it at the very end. Awesome. So without further ado, we're going to jump into things. So as I mentioned, my name's Sydney and I'm a former classroom teacher. I taught mostly French immersion at the elementary level, and now I have the great pleasure of working for an organization called Green Learning. Green Learning is a national charity that creates free online resources about climate change, energy, and the green economy. Our mission is to engage and inspire students like you to create a better world. So before we jump into the actual workshop, I do want to take a moment and just give thanks and show gratitude for the land that I'm tuning in from. So I recognize that today we're all tuning in from different places across Canada and even internationally. I am personally situated in Southern Ontario. I'm located just west of Toronto in a place known as Kitchener-Waterloo. But these lands have been stewarded for generations by Indigenous peoples, and it is the traditional land of the Attawandaron, Anishinaabeg, and Haudenosaunee people. And I wanted to share a piece of digital art by a local Indigenous artist that I think really exemplifies the themes that we're going with today as we talk about art in Canada and environmentalism and how they connect. So this is a digital piece by an artist called Luke Swinson. He is a muralist living here in Kitchener-Waterloo, and he is Anishinaabe. And this piece was a piece done out of resiliency. So sometimes, especially when Earth Day comes around and we're talking about all the things we need to do to protect our Earth, it can be really scary. And sometimes we can get worried about the planet and worried about the future. And he created this piece out of those feelings. And you can see here how nature and people really intersect and how it's a piece of resiliency. It reminds him that he knows we're going to hit all of our targets and that our future is going to be bright and sustainable. And I hope that as we go through this workshop, we can keep that theme and that idea of resiliency, that any challenges that we come up with, whether they're in our environment or personally, that we can overcome. So we're going to be, just to give you an idea of what exactly is going to happen today, is I'm going to, in a second, pass it over to Emma from the Art Canada Institute, who's going to give us a bit of more information of what is the Art Canada Institute, what do they offer, and who was Emily Carr, our artist of the day. Then we're going to pass it back over and we're going to get into some principles and elements of design and actually creating our own works of art. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Emma to learn a little bit more about the Art Canada Institute and Emily Carr. Take it away, Emma.
Thank you so much, Sydney. And hi, everyone. It's so great to be here. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. There we go, hoping that everyone can see my screen. So hi, everyone. It's so great to be here. Happy Earth Month to all of you. My name is Emma, and I'm joining you all from Montreal, where I work for the Art Canada Institute's education program, a program that's entitled the Canadian Schools Art Education Program. So ACI is a nonprofit research and education organization, and we're dedicated to Canadian art and art history. It's really great to be here with all of you today to share a little bit of inspiration about through the paintings of one of Canada's most cherished artists, Emily Carr. So we're going to start by introducing you to Emily Carr through a short learning video, and then I'm going to show you some of her paintings for a little inspiration. A quick note that this learning video consists of music and text. So teachers, if any of you want to read out the text as it's being shown or appoint a reader in the classroom, you're very welcome to do so. There's also a transcript available on our website through a link. And I also invite you to just sit back and relax and enjoy the images, because I'm going to be doing a recap of some of the information at the end of the video. So I'm just going to go ahead and switch over to our learning video here. I'm going to go ahead and enter full screen. Okay, so I'm going to recap some of those details with you now and share a little bit more on the work of this amazing artist. So to recap, Emily Carr was an artist from British Columbia who is well known for creating unique and expressive works of modern art in the early and middle years of the 20th century. She took inspiration from a number of different sources, including her travels. So she traveled to Europe, she traveled to Alaska, and those were major sources of inspiration for her. The interactions and important connections that she built with Indigenous communities across British Columbia, and of course, the love and connection that she felt with the Canadian landscape. So here are a few more fun facts about Emily Carr as we get to know her a little better. She had a number of different educational experiences in different countries, including studying at the California School of Design in San Francisco and studying at the Westminster School of Art in London, England. When she was a young artist, she opened her own art school for children, where she taught them how to create works of art of their own. She also regularly kept a journal where she wrote down her thoughts, her experiences, and her observations. And today, those writings are widely admired in their published form. So we have access to those published journals where we can learn a little bit more about how she approached the process of art making. In 1933, she purchased a caravan, which she called the Elephant, so that she could live in the forest near Victoria, where she painted. And lastly, she had pets. So some of her pets included several Old English sheepdogs who she loved. So now that you know a little bit more about Emily Carr, and before you start making your own artworks, I'm going to show you a few of Emily Carr's paintings for a little bit of inspiration. So as you look at these paintings, have a look at the way that she painted trees and forests and the landscape, and think about what you notice or what you like about her artworks. So this is one of her paintings in which she depicted the landscape in France. In the early 1900s, Carr traveled to Europe, and she was inspired by some of the modern art styles that she encountered there. Her travels informed a lot of her early paintings, like this one. During her life, Carr developed an important emotional and spiritual relationship with the landscape. And you can see that starting to come through in some of her images of trees. Carr especially loved painting trees, which of course is the theme for our workshop today. And you can see that she experimented with different approaches to depicting some of the magical and mysterious qualities of trees. So in the painting on the left, she captures the beauty of a full and dark and dense forest interior. And in the painting on the right, she uses color to give each element a glow that makes these trees leap from the canvas. And lastly, as you saw in the learning video that we looked at together, Carr was very concerned with a process called clear cutting, which refers to the cutting down and removal of every tree from a given area. This was happening in British Columbia to support the logging industry, and Carr created paintings to explore the environmental impact of clear cutting on British Columbia's forests. So you can see that in paintings like this one, in which only a few trees remain and are surrounded by the stumps of trees that have been cut down. So I'll leave you with a quote about trees from Emily Carr to inspire you while you think about how you want to create your own images of trees. So this is from Emily Carr. What do forests make you feel? Their weight and density, their crowded orderliness. There is scarcely room for another tree, and yet there is space around each. How absolutely full of truth they are, how full of reality. The juice and essence of life are in them. They teem with life, growth, and expansion. As the breezes blow among them, they quiver, yet how still they stand, developing with the universe. So with that little bit of inspiration, I'll hand it back over to Sydney.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Emma. It's always so exciting to learn about Emily Carr and some of the inspirational Canadian artists that we have here. And she really did just embody a lot of the things that we're going to be talking about today, which is really awesome. So we're actually going to start getting into our art making now. And so we're going to go through a few check marks that we want to have that help us to bring Emily's influence into the art about our own trees. Okay, so the very first thing that we want to see in our art to really exemplify Emily's work is that we want to create a 2D piece of art about a tree that I know. Now, to make this workshop as accessible as possible, we have given you the choice of what medium you're working with. So whether you're working with pencil crayons or pastels or paints, we're creating 2D works of art today. The next part is that Emily Carr really knew her subjects. She spent a lot of time in forests, getting to know the trees and her environment around her. And we're going to do the same thing. So the very first thing I want to talk about is, what is a tree that I know? Well, let me tell you about a tree that I know. So this here is a tree in my neighborhood. It's on one of my favorite trails that I like to take my dog. And if you look really closely, you might even be able to spot my dog. I love this tree because it's about halfway along our walk. It's at this beautiful clearing, which allows us to stop and rest, enjoy the sunshine. I also love that this tree has a nice cool bend to it. And I just think it looks really unique. This is a tree that I know. I have a relationship with this tree. Are there any trees that you know? Maybe a tree that you see on your daily walk. Maybe a tree that you like to visit or climb. Maybe a tree that has some beautiful leaves in the fall. We're all tuning in from across Canada today, which means a tree that I know might not be a tree that's even available in your area. Here is a chart that shows us the provincial trees in Canada. Now, it doesn't have to be a provincial tree, but I want you to, in your mind, think of a tree that you know. Think of a tree that you have a relationship with, that you've been to, that you can picture in your mind. That's our first piece. Now we're going to talk about some of the principles and elements of design that we're going to use. Okay, so next up, we want to be able to use size to show perspective. So what do I mean by that? Well, here are two pictures of the exact same tree from a different perspective. So on the left, you can see that we're actually sitting pretty far out from the tree. We're looking at the tree, which makes it look like the tree trunk, for the most part, looks very similar in size, going all the way up until it gets to the tip where it thins out. Whereas on the right side, where we're much closer to the tree, it almost looks as if the base of our tree is emphasized, as if it's bigger, and that as we get further away from our eyes, it gets smaller. And we're going to embody this as well. And so I'm going to hop over and just share my document camera, and I hope that's visually okay for everyone. And if there's any issues, just let me know. So let me give you an example what I mean by perspective. So if I was to draw a really, really basic tree from afar, it might look something like this. Now, if I'm really close to my tree, the part that's closest to me is actually going to look much bigger. So it might look something like this. Okay, and what that does, and I'm going to go off the page here, is that makes it look like we're standing right under our tree and we're looking up, just gazing at the beauty and the glory that is our tree. And so we're going to use size, and we're going to go with the stuff that's closest to us is going to be bigger. And as we get further away from our eye line, so as we go up into the tree, reaching up to the sky, it's going to get smaller. That's going to be the same thing if your tree has any, for example, branches on it. So if your tree has branches, those branches are going to be bigger at the bottom, and as they go up, they'll get smaller. Okay, so we're going to use this size to show different perspective and proportion. The last piece of our puzzle that we're going to be taking, and this is really where the influence of Emily Carr is going to be seen in our artwork, is that we can use repeating lines to show texture. So you may have noticed that in Emily Carr's art, and we're going to take a look at a couple of pieces here. So on the left, we have tree trunk, and on the right, we have red cedar. And I want you to look at red cedar for a second and look at the leaves of that tree. Do they look a lot like leaves? Or do they look more like organic shapes that are moving in the wind? Emily Carr used a lot of repeating lines, and we're going to do the same thing in our artwork. So even though a leaf, if we were to draw it, might look something like this, that's not how Emily Carr drew or painted. She was very impressionistic, meaning that she just took an impression of her subject. And so instead, when we draw our trees, we're going to be really loose, and we're going to use a lot of repeating lines. So in our tree trunk, we're not going to draw little cross hatches or little dots to show the texture of the trunk or the bark. We're going to use lines to show those majestic trees and how they grow and wrap around each other. So you can see, and your lines don't have to be anything special. They could be just some repeating lines. They don't even have to go all the way up your tree. Now, this is a tree that you know. I don't know your tree. And so it's really up to you how you use these repeated lines. We're going to use those repeated lines in the trunk of our tree. We're also going to use them in the foliage. So when we're creating leaves or even needles on our arts, we're going to keep using these repeated lines to show texture. So we're not going to show little individual leaves. We're going to show big organic shapes. And the same thing goes for if you want to add any other details to your forest landscape. So for example, if you want to add some grass, you can also do that showing repeated lines. So I wanted to show you again the art that we're going to be inspired by here. Because before we get started, I do want to give you a minute to visualize and come together with exactly what it is you're going to be doing. So right now I'm going to put on some sounds, and I want you to just close your eyes, and I want you to think about the tree that you know. Okay, we're going to get in the mindset and all ready to start our art. Okay, you might hear that sound in the background. Now I want you to imagine that you're sitting right in front of your tree, as close as you can scoot up to that tree. If you reached out, you could even hug that tree if you wanted to. Look up. What do you see? Do you see pine needles or leaves? Do you see the texture of the tree trunk? Maybe you can even see the sky poking through. What do you smell? Do you smell dirt or grass? What do you feel? And I'm going to take a quote from Emily Carr, where she says, "What do these forests make you feel?" So you might feel things physically, such as the wind blowing through your hair or grass in your hands, but you might also feel things emotionally. You might feel happy. You might be excited. What do you feel? And lastly, what do you hear when you sit in front of your tree? I'm going to turn this up a little bit. What do you hear? So now that we all have a really good idea, we're centered, we've got our tree in our mind, we're ready to begin our art. Now, like I said, I'm going to be working with pencil crayon today, but you can work with whatever medium you have access to. I'm also going to be working on a bit of a smaller sheet here today. That's because I'm going to be doing a demonstration. Now, I want you to choose the size of your art based on how much time you have. So whether it's just the time you have here in the workshop, or maybe you have time after the session to continue on the learning. Maybe you even have some time tomorrow during Earth Day where you can finish this up. So choose your size accordingly. Once you have your art piece, we're all going to start with pencils. So even if you plan on painting or using pastels, I want you to start with pencil, and we're going to start with a nice light brush stroke, and we're going to start with the tree trunk. Now, like I said, we're going to start by the piece that's closest to us is going to be big, and then as we go up, it's going to get smaller. And I don't want you to get your tree trunk all the way to the top, because we want to have some space to add some foliage, whether that be leaves or pine needles. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start my demo, and I'm going to be doing it based on a tree that I know, but I want you to do yours based on a tree that you know. Okay, so I'm going to start with my tree trunk, and I'm going to come around like this. Mine's going to be a bit of a funky tree like this. And again, as I get closer to the ground, I'm going to get bigger. Okay, so now I've got my tree trunk, and remember, I'm not going to be adding any little hash marks or anything like that to show the bark. We're going to be using some repeated lines. Okay, and I'm going to do these really lightly, and I'm going to do them a little harder here so that you can see, but I want you to be light with your pencil so that we don't see these marks when we go to add in our coloring crayons or our pastels or even our paint. So my tree kind of goes around wonky like this. So I'm going to show, my lines are going to come here like this. And I'm going to show these repeated lines, and you know what? One of these lines is going to come like that. And if it doesn't look exactly like a tree, that's okay, because our goal isn't to look exactly like things in real life. That's not what Emily Carr did. She took her impression of things. Okay, so I have a tree trunk, I have some repeating lines. Now I want to add some foliage. Okay, so whether it's leaves or maybe it's pine needles, we have lots of options. And here I'm going to show you a couple of options. So here's an option that uses a pine needle tree. As you can see, there aren't little hash marks that show pine needles. It's still that swirly repeated lines. Here's another one that maybe looks more like leaves, but still has those swirly lines. So you can see that we can use shapes around our lines to show exactly what it is that we want to give an impression of, okay? And you don't have to stay on your page. You can go off the page if you want. If from where you're sitting looking up at your tree, you can't see the whole thing, that's okay. I'm going to do some really funky swirls here like this, okay? I'm going to show that these are some pretty thick leaves going here. These are going to come all around. I might even have my tree trunk pop out a little bit before I draw some more leaves. And these leaves are going right off the page, and that's okay. Awesome. So now I have some foliage. Next, I'm going to add in some ground. Okay, I'm just going to add in a nice soft line. So Emily Carr really avoided sharp lines. And what I mean by sharp lines is like really hard, straight, rigid lines. She focused a lot on really organic, flowing lines and shapes. And that's what I want you to try and do as well. Once you have a sketch outline of what your tree is going to look like, you can decide to either add in some background or, again, look at your time and how much time you have in your class to work on this art project. Consider just leaving it blank and focusing on the main tree. Then we can start to add in colors. So I'm going to choose just some standard brown colors. And for my lines, I'm actually going to choose a darker brown. And that's how I'm going to show lines with my pencil crayons. Now, depending on what medium you're working with, that's going to change. So with paints, you might want to mix different colors and do large, big brush strokes to show your lines. So adjust for whatever medium you're working with, but try and get the look of those repeated lines seen throughout your art. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to color in a little bit here. I'm not going to do too dark and I'm not going to spend too much time on it so that we can let you get free. So you can see then I'll use maybe a lighter color around and the darker bit here. I'll go a little bit darker to show those lines. And as I go, the more I add and the more I layer on top, these lines are going to start to pop out. Okay, and so that's where we're heading right now. And we do want to give you lots of time to work on your art. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop talking so much now. I'm going to put Emily Carr's artwork back up on the screen so that you can all see her art and see her inspiration. And I want you to get started. So start with your trunk, add your foliage, be loose. Think about our repeating lines. Think about the size and the perspective that you're seeing your tree from. And think about the tree that you know and how it makes you feel, both inside and out. I'm going to put on some just light audio, some forest sounds while you work. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. We will come back together in about 10 minutes for a break. So work away for about the next 10 minutes before we come together again. If you have any questions or comments, please let me know in the chat and we can address them. Okay, so we've been working for a little bit of time now. And one thing that we love to do in art is to just take a step back for a second. So, right now, if you haven't done so yet, I want you to just put down whatever you're working with. And we're going to just do a quick walk around. If you're able in your class or even just with a person beside you, I want you to share what you have so far. Give your team some feedback or give your partner some feedback. What looks awesome? Maybe there's something on their art that you want to incorporate into your art. How did you? How did you do this? How do you know that tree? What relationship do you have with that tree? So take a minute, share your art with at least one person, get some feedback, and then we're going to keep on going. And we're going to come back in about 5 minutes. And teachers, we have some really awesome resources and some exciting things for you. So keep working away and make sure that you share your art with at least one person. And here's my art. So you can see how far along I've come. I've finished up my tree trunk and now I'm just working on my foliage piece. So I'll keep working away and I want you to as well. How's your art coming along? Here's where I'm at. Just to give you an update, I've filled in some of my leaves and I've even started my groundwork. So students, I want you to keep working away. Right now, we want to make sure that just because our time here today was short, that you're able to extend this learning beyond just our workshop today, and that you can keep learning about these amazing and influential Canadian artists, and more importantly, about the environment. So I'm going to pass it over to Emma, who has a wealth of resources for teachers. So Emma, I'll pass it over to you.
Thanks so much. Yeah, so teachers, I just wanted to take a couple of moments at the end here as your students continue working away, just to share with you some of the resources that we have through the Art Canada Institute, in case you want to continue integrating the work of Canadian and Indigenous artists into your classrooms and into some of your activities and projects related to Earth Month. So by way of conclusion, I wanted to briefly introduce you to some of our resources on the land and environmentalism. So you're looking at them here. All of these teacher resource guides are available on our website for free in English and in French. And they're part of a growing digital library of teacher resource guides that we have developed that explore cross-curricular connections to Canadian art. So we have over 30 guides to date, inspired by the work of historical and contemporary artists in Canada that explore everything from food and nutrition to computer science to land and Indigenous worldviews. And all of these guides provide introductions to artists, ideas for learning activities and culminating projects, a slideshow to support in-class presentations, and additional resources to further learning. So we welcome you to check these out. They run all the way from K to 12. And again, they're accessible through our website in English and French for free. We're particularly excited about our latest teacher resource guide publication. So this has been developed in close collaboration with Green Learning, and we are just about to publish it. So this will be accessible in celebration of Earth Day tomorrow. And this new resource explores the impacts of climate change through the work of 3 Canadian artists: the contemporary photographer, Edward Bertinsky, the master carver, Avilu Tunili, and the painter we looked at today, Emily Carr. So for Emily Carr enthusiasts, this guide integrates some of her work as well. So the guide presents 3 learning activities, each one centered on one of the artists, and it explores themes connected to climate change, including water systems and climate change, the effects of climate change on Arctic wildlife, and a culminating task that invites students to explore nature-based climate solutions. So we welcome you to check that out. It should be available tomorrow. And we're really excited to see what students come up with in connection with some of these artists and some of those activities. And lastly, we welcome you to join our teacher readership. So every 2 weeks, ACI publishes an education newsletter for teachers that brings together news about the education program, resources, and ideas for bringing Canadian art into your classrooms. So if you're interested, you can sign up for that through our website. And for anyone on social media, we also welcome you to follow us for Canadian art, more Canadian art inspiration, Canadian artist spotlights, cross-curricular connections, and more resource ideas. And a very, very heartfelt thank you for welcoming us today into your classrooms.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Emma. That was awesome. And we already had some comments in the chat just about how great those resources are. And I've used them personally in the classroom, and they're super fantastic. So I'm really excited about this joint resource that we have as well. So definitely check them out. There will also be a follow-up email that goes out tomorrow with the recording for this session. So if you want to watch it again, if you want to access any of those resources, we'll also have the links to that in that follow-up email. I do want to share my art with everyone. So I did just wrap up really briefly. I threw in some glue in my background here. And this is what a tree I know looks like. So I already told you the story of how I know this tree and what relationship it has to me. I encourage you to share your art. Not only with the people in your classroom, but even beyond. So we do have some really awesome prize packs that are available. If you want to share your art on social media, for example, you can find both Green Learning and the Art Canada Institute at the tags on the board. You can also email us your art. So I've put our emails on the board here as well. We'd love to see if you are open to sharing now. We will open it up. We'll also open up for any questions or comments about this workshop. This has really been a unique workshop for us, collaborating with Art Canada Institute and focusing on art and environmentalism. And it's something that we'd love to hear your feedback on, of if this is something that you want more of as well. So I want to thank everyone so much for coming. I know everyone's schedules are quite different, so if you have to get going, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you have a really fantastic Earth Week. I hope that this was as enjoyable for you as it was for me. I know I really enjoyed creating this, even just a tiny piece of art. It was really just meditative to listen to the sounds of nature and to just create something that I feel is really beautiful and that I can't wait to share with somebody that I know. So thank you so much. And I want to say a big thank you to Emma from Art Canada Institute for joining us today and giving us a really great background on who Emily Carr was, her importance and her significance here in Canada, and sharing some of her really awesome artworks with us. So thank you so much for joining us, Emma. Thank you all the classes who tuned in. We'll hang on for the next about 9 minutes. So if you do want to share your art or ask any questions, we welcome you to do that now. Otherwise, you can keep on working away.
Thanks, Sydney and everybody. That was really fun.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining.
Yes, thank you very much. It was awesome.
Thanks for joining
I'm
us.
so glad.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I love technology and that we're all able to come together to create art no matter where we are. This has just been really, really special.
So wonderful. So wonderful to hear the students as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I hope you have a fantastic Earth Day. Like I said, we'll hang on for the next 7 or so minutes, right until the top of the hour. So feel free to hang on. If you're still working away, we can work away together. And don't forget to share your art with us. We really want to see what you've created. I shared my art and I'd love to see what you came up with.